All right, let's dive in. We're taking on Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It is. And, most folks think they've got the Apple story down pat, but this biography, it offers a whole new perspective on Jobs.
Totally. What sets Isaacson's work apart is the access he had. I mean, we're talking unprecedented access to Jobs, his family, friends, even rivals.
It's kind of wild to think about, right?
Yeah,
Especially with Jobs being so, well, controlling.
exactly. And what's even crazier is that Jobs, a man known for his meticulous control, gave Isaacson complete freedom. Didn't even ask to read the manuscript before it went public.
Wow, that's surprising. Makes you think maybe he wanted the full, unfiltered story out there.
Maybe so. But for us, it's like getting a backstage pass to the real Steve Jobs, the good, the bad, the utterly captivating.
So we're going beyond the Apple origin story everyone knows, right?
Whoa.
We're digging into the stuff that shaped him, the relationships that pushed him, the stories that reveal the man behind the myth. Okay, so let's rewind. Picture young Steve Jobs growing up in Silicon Valley just as the tech world was about to explode.
It's the 60s, and everyone's buzzing about these things called microchips. And Jobs is right there, soaking it all in. He's fascinated by electronics, from tinkering with Heath kits.
These kits.
Yeah, those build-it-yourself electronic kits, to spending hours in his dad's workbench. It's like that's where the seeds of innovation were planted.
Like hands-on learning.
Absolutely. And there's this great anecdote about a carbon microphone where Jobs figures out he's actually smarter than his dad.
Really?
Yeah, it's like a pivotal moment for him, realizing his own potential.
Huge. But even as a kid, Jobs had this rebellious streak. Remember the blue box?
Oh, yeah. That illegal device he and Wozniak built to make free long-distance calls.
It's such a classic Jobs move, pushing boundaries, bending the rules. Even back then, he had that entrepreneurial spirit.
Definitely. For him, it wasn't just about making money. It was about the challenge, the thrill of finding a workaround. And that theme, you can see it throughout his entire career.
Right. He's always looking for the hack, the shortcut, the better way. But then there's this other side to him, these influences that seem totally at odds with the tech world. The 1970s counterculture.
Right, like communes.
Zen Buddhism, calligraphy.
He's like, how do these worlds even connect in Steve Jobs?
It's fascinating how it all comes together.
Totally. His time at the All-One Farm commune, his exploration of Eastern spirituality, even his fascination with calligraphy, they all feed into his design philosophy.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Think about it. His minimalist aesthetic, that obsession with simplicity, the emphasis on user experience, it traces back to these early influences.
It's true. He always valued elegance and simplicity.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's jump back into the tech world.
Yeah.
Late 70s, Apple is born. Two guys in a garage, the classic Silicon Valley story. But even then, the dynamic between Jobs and Wozniak was pretty complex, wasn't it?
From the very beginning, there was tension.
Like what?
Well, Jobs was driven by control, while Wozniak, he had that hacker ethos. Wozniak was the tech genius, but Jobs saw the bigger picture. He understood how to turn a brilliant idea into something people would want to buy.
He wasn't just making computers, he was making desire.
Exactly. And then come the Lisa and the Macintosh. These projects put Apple on the map, but they also reveal a lot about Jobs' personality. We start seeing that reality distortion field at work.
The reality distortion field, what's that?
It's this almost mythical ability Jobs had to bend reality, to convince himself and everyone around him that impossible things were totally possible.
He could convince people of anything.
Pretty much. It's both inspiring and exhausting, He pushed his team to do amazing things, but often at a personal cost.
Sounds intense.
It was. And speaking of visionaries, we can't forget the famous visit to Xerox PR. That's where Jobs saw the graphical user interface, the GUI. That would change everything.
That's big stuff.
Huge. But what's really interesting is that Xerox, the company that invented the GUI, they didn't really get it. They didn't see its potential. But Jobs did.
He saw what it could be.
Immediately. He understood how revolutionary a user-friendly interface would be. He envisioned computers for everyone, not just tech experts.
So that's where it started.
Yeah, and then the Macintosh launch is pure Jobs. The iconic 1984 Super Bowl commercial, the theatrical presentation, he didn't just launch a product, he created an event.
Like a showman?
Totally. He understood the power of storytelling. But even with all the hype, the Macintosh didn't sell well at first.
Ouch.
Yeah. Jobs wasn't used to setbacks. He was used to being ahead of the curve. This stumble, though, it led to the next chapter in his story. NXT, and Pixar.
And that's where we see these two sides of Jobs collide, right? The innovator and well, the demanding leader.
Exactly. He poured everything into NXT, building this technologically advanced computer, but it flopped.
What about Pixar?
Pixar was a whole different story. He saw the potential in computer animation and helped create a studio that would change filmmaking forever.
From computers to movies. Talk about range.
And resilience. But it's not all business with Jobs. We get a glimpse into his personal life, too. The complicated relationships, the daughter he initially denied.
Yeah, his personal life was definitely messy.
His relationship with Chris Ann Brennan and Lisa's birth, it's a revealing chapter. It shows his capacity for love and for denial, and how those two things could be at war within him. His marriage to Lorene Powell, though, it offers a really interesting contrast.
She seems like a grounding force for him.
Definitely. And even their approaches to design were different.
Opposites attract, maybe?
Maybe. You can see how their personalities, though different, complemented each other. She challenged him, but also provided stability, something someone like Jobs probably needed.
I can only imagine living with someone that intense.
Right. But then, bam, he makes this triumphant return to Apple. It's like something out of a movie. The company he started is on the verge of collapse, and he comes back to not only save it, but to make it even bigger than before.
The iMac, the iPod, the iTunes store.
Yeah.
Jobs was leading this wave of innovation, and he was always thinking ahead, wasn't he? This whole digital hub concept.
Yeah.
It was genius, making the Mac the center of your digital life.
Totally. He created an ecosystem, this seamless integration of hardware, software, and content. He executed it brilliantly, even if it meant playing hardball with the music industry.
Like when he went head-to-head with the record labels over iTunes.
Exactly. Jobs knew what he wanted, and he was willing to fight for it, even while battling cancer.
It's incredible. The guy never stopped pushing boundaries.
It's like his health challenges just fueled his drive even further. The iPhone, the iPad, these weren't just products. They changed everything. But even with all the success, Jobs had his critics.
I'd imagine so.
His obsession with control, with keeping everything within Apple's walls, it rubbed some people the wrong way.
Yeah, not everyone was a fan of that.
He could be demanding, even ruthless. And his battles with Google, with the media, it paints a picture of a man who was brilliant, but also deeply flawed.
So a complicated figure, for sure.
Definitely. As we get to the later part of his life, his legacy gets even more complex. He was this icon, this visionary, but also a reminder that brilliance can come at a cost.
Heavy stuff.
Yeah, his story is ultimately a human one, full of contradictions, triumphs, and failures. That's what makes it so captivating. During this time in Jobs' life, there's this stark contrast almost between his public image and his personal struggles.
Right.
On one hand, he's at the top of his game, leading Apple to this crazy success. But then on the other hand, he's fighting this life-threatening illness.
It's a side of him we don't often see, the vulnerability, the fear.
Especially early on, he was super secretive about his health.
That's true.
Which, if you think about it, was classic Jobs. He wanted control, even over how his own mortality was perceived. But as his health got worse, he couldn't hide it anymore. His resignation from Apple in 2011, it was a huge turning point. Not just for the company, but for the whole tech world.
Yeah, it felt like the end of an era.
Totally.
But even stepping down, Jobs couldn't fully let go. He stayed on as chairman and was still involved in big decisions.
Right, especially the new Apple campus, that futuristic, spaceship-like building. It's like a monument to the future, even as his own future was uncertain.
It's kind of poetic, right? The man obsessed with control, ultimately facing something he couldn't control.
Yeah.
But even as he was facing his own mortality, his mind was still going, always thinking of new ideas.
It's remarkable, really, that drive, that unwavering belief in the power of technology. He never stopped pushing, even as time was running out.
He wasn't just making products. He was shaping culture. I mean, think about the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad. These things changed how we do everything.
It's easy to forget, but before the iPod, listening to music was a completely different experience. You had these clunky CD players, tangled headphones. Jobs saw a way to make it better, more beautiful, more intuitive.
Right, like he streamlined the whole thing.
Exactly. And he did the same with the iPhone. He took a device that was mostly for making calls and turned it into a pocket-sized computer that could do almost anything.
It's crazy how much we rely on those things now.
He got that people connect with products on an emotional level. It's not just the technology, it's the experience, the design, how it makes you feel.
That's why Apple products have that almost cult-like following. They're more than gadgets. They're like status symbols. Extensions of ourselves, almost.
But Jobs' obsession with control, with keeping everything in Apple's little world, it did have downsides. He was so protective of his vision, even if it meant limiting what users could do.
Like when he wouldn't allow Adobe Flash on the iPhone and iPad.
Yeah, that was controversial. Jobs saw Flash as this clunky, outdated tech that ruined the user experience. His critics said he was stifling innovation, too focused on controlling everything.
It was a gamble.
It was, but it paid off. Flash basically disappeared, and Apple's devices took off. But it's still a debate we have today, openness versus control, innovation versus user experience.
It's about finding that balance.
Exactly. And it's a debate that's at the heart of Apple's legacy. They've built this incredibly successful company by offering a really controlled experience. But that same approach gets them accused of being anti-competitive, of limiting choice.
It's complicated for sure.
It is. Jobs was a visionary, a genius. But he was flawed, too, demanding and often ruthless. But there's no denying his impact. He revolutionized so many industries: personal computers, animation, music, phones, tablets, digital publishing.
It's a long list.
And he created a company that, even after he's gone, keeps pushing boundaries. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Jobs' life and work, what are the lessons here? What can we take away from this to navigate the digital world?
What sticks out for you?
I think one of the biggest things is having a vision. Knowing what you want and chasing it relentlessly.
That makes sense.
But it's not just about having a vision, right? It's also about communicating it, inspiring others to believe in it.
Right, getting people on board.
Jobs was a master storyteller. He knew how to capture imaginations, create excitement.
He was a showman.
Totally.
Yeah.
He understood that technology is about more than just functionality. It's about emotion, aspiration, connecting with people.
He wasn't just selling gadgets, he was selling a feeling.
Exactly. And that's more important than ever today. As technology becomes more and more a part of our lives, it's crucial to remember the human element.
It's easy to lose sight of that sometimes.
It is. We need to design tech that enhances our lives, not takes away from them. Tech that connects us, not isolates us. Tech that empowers, not controls.
I like that.
Jobs, for all his faults, he got that. He believed tech could be a force for good. And while he didn't always succeed, he left his mark.
That he did.
Even now, years after his death, Steve Jobs is still such a polarizing figure.
It's true. Some people see him as this visionary genius. Others focus on his flaws, his demanding personality, the tough business tactics.
It's fascinating how much debate there still is about his legacy. You've got people who practically worship him, overlooking any flaws, and then others who condemn his methods, focusing on how much pressure he put on employees, his sometimes cutthroat approach.
He definitely wasn't perfect. But regardless of how you feel about Jobs, there's no denying he left a mark. He changed how we use technology, how we get information, even how we think about design.
Oh, absolutely. His focus on simplicity, elegance, making things user-friendly, it's become a standard in the tech world.
It's everywhere now.
And it's not just about looks, it's about making products that are intuitive, enjoyable to use, that fit seamlessly into our lives.
It's about making tech that just works.
Exactly. And that constant push for perfection, that's a big part of his legacy, right? He wasn't ever satisfied with good enough. He always wanted to go further, make something truly exceptional.
He was always striving for more.
But that drive, like we talked about, it could be a double-edged sword. It led to amazing innovation, but it also created this really demanding, sometimes even toxic work environment. There are tons of stories about Jobs pushing his employees to their absolute limits, expecting nothing less than perfection.
He was known for being tough.
He was. It's like he could see the potential in things, in people, and he'd find a way to pull it out no matter what.
Sounds intense.
He wasn't afraid to take risks, to challenge the way things were done, to believe in the seemingly impossible. And that fearlessness, that boldness, I think we can all learn from that. Even if we don't agree with all of his methods, that willingness to think differently, to disrupt the norm, it's pretty inspiring.
He was a master of disruption, but he was also a master storyteller.
Oh, yeah.
He knew how to build anticipation, create excitement around his products. Think about those Apple product launches, the presentations, the big reveals. It was all part of the show.
He totally got it. Technology is more than just features and specs. It's about emotion, aspiration, connecting with people on a deeper level. He wasn't just selling gadgets, he was selling a vision, a way of life.
He was selling a feeling.
Exactly. And that vision, that ability to connect with people emotionally, that's a huge part of why Apple is still such a powerhouse today.
It's more than just a brand, right?
Right. But it also brings up some important questions about the role of technology in our lives. Are we too reliant on these devices? Are we trading privacy and individuality for convenience and being connected all the time?
Those are big questions.
They are, and they're questions Jobs himself grappled with, especially later in life. He was a complicated guy, full of contradictions, a visionary who revolutionized tech, but also a demanding leader who could be ruthless and controlling.
It's hard to sum him up in a simple way.
It really is. And his legacy is just as complicated. He left behind a world that his creations changed, but also a world still trying to figure out what all those changes mean.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the life and legacy of Steve Jobs, it's clear there's no easy answer, no single takeaway. He was a man of his time, driven by ambition, passion, and an unwavering belief in his own vision. He made mistakes, but he also achieved amazing things. And even years later, his story continues to fascinate and inspire and make us think.
He definitely made us think. And maybe that's the most important lesson we can take from Steve Jobs, to embrace those complexities, the contradictions, the triumphs and failures that make a life well lived. To aim high, even if it means stumbling along the way, and to leave behind something that keeps people talking and thinking long after we're gone.
That's a powerful thought. Well, it's been an incredible journey, exploring the world of Steve Jobs through Isaacson's biography. We hope this deep dive has given you a fresh perspective on this iconic figure and his lasting impact on our world. The conversation doesn't have to end here, though. We encourage you to share your thoughts, keep exploring the fascinating world of tech and innovation, and learn more about the people who shape it. Until next time, keep diving deep.